my whole area is helping people to use your data to grow your business. I work with businesses of all sizes. So really the people that I enjoy working with most are actually the small to medium size business owners, simply because I can really see a big impact whenever I'm working with them. So I think oftentimes actually, people find or feel that data is for big corporates and beyond people's reach. But really what I'd like to leave you guys with today is sort of the understanding that data can be used by anybody to give you, set your goals, improve your decision making, and gain competitive advantage as well. So as Pauline said, my name is Tracey O'Neill. I am the principal consultant and founder of The Data Consultant. I came from a recruitment background, so I was a recruitment consultant for many years. In terms of my journey, I actually always was a data person, believe it or not, Pauline. So my primary degree was actually in information management, and that was back in the day when you had to go to computer lab. You didn't have a laptop or anything like that. So that's not giving away my age, but that's how far back I suppose my data journey goes. But as I say, I had a 10-year career as a recruitment consultant. And then I had an opportunity within the company that I was in to do some project work. And that ended up in me carving out a role for myself as a data quality. It was a global recruitment business that I was in. And as you can imagine, the amount of data that was there was absolutely vast. I mean, we had, I think, 12 or 14 offices globally. So there was a real need for data quality within the company. So that kind of started off the journey. And then I sort of moved myself forward into this role of head of analytics and insights. So unfortunately then came COVID and I got made redundant, but I took that as an opportunity then to go back to DCU to do a postgrad in business analytics, which was great because it just gave me the confidence, everything that I had sort of taught myself. It sort of gave me give a framework around it and let me realize that what I was doing was actually correct. But how I came here then was I did start a business course with the Leo at I think probably summer of 2021. And it really, really helped me. And as I say, sort of gave me the confidence to launch the business. So without further ado, we'll start with some data. So as I think Mary said just before the call started, an article in Forbes back in 2018 outlined that the mind-boggling amount of data that we produce every day. So you can see here, if you go from 2010 right up now to sort of predicted in 2025, the amount of data that is around us all day, every day. So we're drowning in data. I suppose I kind of go back to my early days as a recruitment consultant. We had a fax machine, CVs to people, and we phoned people up and talked to them about candidates. And now, recruitment consultants are dealing with hundreds of inbound CVs every single day. And in my line of work, I do a lot of work actually in the recruitment sector still, and it's really trying to kind of find your way through that data to really get into the data that you need to do your job. So I'm here this morning to talk about business data analytics. And again, people, when they think data science, they think machine learning, they think, predictive analytics, and that all is part of the data world. But really what I am looking at is business data. So that's your data coming from your sales, your marketing, your HR and people's teams, your operations, and really looking at that to understand what it is that drives your business forward. So when we talk about business data analytics, and I actually said this to Pauline the other day, I was always a person who, color coordinated my toys and, ordered my books in my library as a kid from, top to bottom. So I was, really interested in, sorting things out and making sense. So Harvard Business Review actually defines data analytics as the practice of examining data to answer questions, identify trends, and extract insights. And in a business context, this is what's referred to as business data analytics. So my little Lego graphic here is basically saying, this is your data, you sort it out, we arrange it, we prepare it visually, and then we explain it with a story. And that, I think, is the piece that is missing for a lot of people, is really kind of to visualize the data and understand what story it's telling. So as we go through this, hopefully this will start to make sense as well. So what does a data consultant do? Really what I do is map how data flows through your company. So you might be a small business, medium size, or even a large corporate, but in essence, data website into your database in some way. It might then flow out to a marketing automation system. It might then flow to your invoicing system, and so on. So what I try to do is basically map how the data flows through your company, because you really want to know. I mean, the business questions that people ask me are things like, how do we know if a certain marketing initiative is working? And in order to answer that question, we have to understand, where your customers came, what source they came from, but then obviously what activities you did in the middle to convert them into a customer, and then how much you made at the end. And in order to do that, you kind of have to stitch all of the data together. And that's what I do, and that's actually the bit that I really enjoy doing as well for companies. Data quality is really important, so we need to find ways to improve the quality of the data. So again, I just spoke marketing sources, for example. You need to know where the data is coming from. You need to know, what, let's say, what if it's come from the website, or if it's come from an email marketing campaign, and so on. So there's a big piece around data quality and making sure that things are, I suppose, qualified and tagged and sorted, as I talk about, going back to my Lego example. But then you're going to identify the opportunities, and whether that's efficiencies or reducing costs or increasing revenue, all of that can be found within your data in any size of business. And then we're working with businesses to turn the actual raw data into insights. People will then sort of say, well, what do you mean? What does turning data into actionable insights really mean? So I find that a really good way of explaining it is if you think about your smartwatch. And this is sort of a practical example of how data can turn into insights. So the data that we're looking at here is, we're saying we've done 7,442 steps. The information is the little dashboard that's basically putting your raw number of steps into context. So that's showing you how many steps that you've done today compared to yesterday, compared to last week. Where the insight piece comes in is that we're saying we've got 7,442 steps. The target, I think, is, I'm not sure what it is there, but I think it's 10,000, and it's 4:42 in the afternoon. So the action that you need to take is, this is how many steps I've done. This is the target that I need to get to. This is how much time I have left. I need to get out and put my shoes on and go for a walk. So if you think about that little flow in terms of your everyday business, you might have set yourself a target of revenue for, I don't know, €5,000 in a month. And you're kind of getting there, you're maybe at 2,000, 3,000. So what you're trying to get to is, first of all, am I trending upwards? Am I trending downwards? What are the things that are influencing me getting to my target? And all of that will be in your data as well. So you will eventually see things like, where is the most of your money coming from? I'm working with a company at the moment, and when we actually sat down to look at where their business is coming from, 80% of it is coming from one particular industry. So I'm sort of a big fan of find out what's working and then do more of that. So if you're getting 80% of your revenue from one particular sector and you haven't actually covered all of that sector, in terms of, your business development or your marketing, go there, because those are the people that are really obviously buying what you have to sell. So So some practical examples of how you might use data in your own business. And again, as I say, this is not just for big corporates. This is for everybody. So as I just mentioned now, you can use your sales data. So that's all about your customers. So if, for example, you have, I don't know, let's say you were selling tennis rackets. I don't know why that came into my head, but let's say you were selling, sports equipment. And you realize that, a certain demographic, for example, particularly spend money in a particular area, you might then want to cross-sell and say, okay, they're buying tennis rackets, we'll also sell them. And you might then say, we might actually upsell, and we might say, we're selling them tennis rackets, but let's also sell them tennis shoes. So a different product. So it's really good to understand your customer data and your sales data in really granular detail to understand where your money's coming from. Because I think, and we're all like this, I'm like this as well, you kind of have the temptation of just saying, right, I have a customer, they're interested, sell, and make money. But the whole point about being data driven is trying to get as much return on the effort that you're putting in. So again, that sort of leads on to the next one, which is about the marketing data. So people will talk to me a lot about email marketing campaigns, and we'll talk about open rates and click-through rates, and that's all great. But I'm very much saying, but is that actually leading to sales? And in a lot of the organizations that I work with, marketing teams and sales teams separately. So marketing can be over here saying, we've got a great open rate, and sales are over here saying, but it's not actually converting to leads, as a really broad example. But if you are doing, even in your own business, if you're sitting down to do a marketing campaign, nurture campaign, you're spending hours on Canva designing something up, you're spending time and money on potentially a marketing platform, it has to result in money at the end of the day. It has to result in revenue. So open rates and click rates, absolutely keep an eye on them, because they're going to tell you if you're sending the right content to the right people. One actually that I would add into that is unsubscribe rates, because that will really tell you whether you're sending the right message to the right people. But always match it with what is the outcome that you are looking for. In terms of operations data, then that's all about creating efficiencies in processes. So if you, again, potentially have a sales team, or if you're thinking about your own sales process, what you're trying to say is, how many calls does it take to get a meeting? How many meetings does it take to get a sale? And what you're looking for all the time is trying to sort of tweak the pieces in your process that will improve your ratios, because obviously you want as tight a process, as few calls to create as many meetings, and as few meetings to create as many sales. So all the time be thinking about your funnel and what's actually impacting the bottom line, we say. And then the last one look at is around people data, and that's one that I think people is very underutilized, and a lot of I suppose talent acquisition teams and HR teams, they have potentially, not to do them a disservice, but they have a gut feel of who are the right people to hire into jobs. How long does a person stay in a particular job? But if you put the data around it, then you can really start to understand, yes, well, people who come from this degree work really well in this role, or they don't, for example, or, people in this particular role, let's say if it's a software developer, and an average lifespan of a software developer, junior software developer in your company is 2 years, then that when the 2-year mark is coming up for that person, they're either going to leave or be promoted, but you need to be out hiring somebody to replace them. So you can always, what data does is it just gives you, not a crystal ball, but it gives you some trends and patterns, so you can sort of start preparing for what might happen in the future. One of my favorite stories about data, it comes from a book called Big Data in Practice by a guy called Bernard Marr, M-A-R-R, and he's sort of the data gurus, but how there was a particular company, and they so selling meat pies and sausage rolls and whatnot, and they decided that they were going to put an offer, so I don't know, whatever, 3 for 2 or whatever offer in their window. So what they decided to do was put a little kind of camera to see how many people, to count how many people stopped to look at the advertisement in the window, and then how many of those people came into the shop. So literally big data, in practice. But what they found was not only did they begin to understand what offers were drawing people into the shop, the consequence is that they realized that the highest the window of the butcher shop was between 11 and 12 midnight on a Friday night. And it turned out that there were 2 pubs at the end of either end of the street. And what they realized was that people were coming and going from the pubs. So what they ended up doing was selling meat pies and sausage rolls to the people coming out of the pubs at the end of the night. So, sort of a bit of a random story, but it just kind of goes to show you when you're looking for the signals, they're there, and even if you're not looking for them, they might jump out and hit you. So these guys obviously created a whole new revenue stream for something that they didn't even realize was going to happen. So this is the only science bit in this whole presentation, but basically you have got 4 different levels of data analysis. Where most people are at our analysis stage, and that's what happened, business intelligence, what happened previously, and so on. The second step then, analysis, and that's the why. And if I could get everybody in my world to be thinking about what happened and why, that would be a really, really good start for me. So if I could leave you guys on this call with thinking about what happened and then understanding why did it happen, that's really sort of your data analysis in action. So as you can see there, we've got sort of a value and difficulty. So as you go forward, then you've got things like what will happen. So that's talking about your trends. So that's your predictive analytics, and that's getting a bit more kind of sophisticated, your forecasting and so on. And then the prescriptive analytics are how can we make it happen? So if we want to get to a certain outcome, what are the levers that we need to pull in certain ways to reach our target or increase our revenue and so on. So at this point, normally people get really, when I'm doing workshops, people are looking, this is all way too complicated. And many people are overwhelmed when talking about data. But the key is to become fluent in data. So data fluency has become an essential skill for everybody. But it's also a skill that can be learned. So if you think of it as learning a foreign language, when you're talking about data, you might be afraid of making a mistake. You might not be familiar with the dialect. You might have some residual trauma from learning it at school. And you just may not have anybody to speak to who also knows the language. So the language in this instance is data. But really data fluency is asking the right questions, telling the story, and visually sort of presenting data clearly, and handling data disagreements constructively. Because one thing that in my corporate world, it always happened, you presented a graph on screen and 3 people in the room said, where did you get that number? That's not right. I don't have that number. It comes from somewhere different. And that always kind of is part of not being afraid to have that discussion. But really, that's where your data quality sort of piece comes into it as well. I have another recommendation for a book. So if you do really want to kind of, learn how to talk data with your team, for example, or your bank manager, or if you're putting together a business case, there's a really good book called How to Talk About Data by Martin Epler and Fabienne Bunsley, and that based on a key not confident in their work with, analyze and present an argument using data. And again, I worked with a very senior finance person in a company in the past, and there was an 85-page board pack, and he knew the very number on page 16 that was the number that was going to be critical to the success of the business in the following quarter. But nobody else did. He was the finance guy. But you have to bring your with you. Operations people have to understand. Everybody has to kind of understand where we're going in terms of the trends. So I thought that was an interesting one that kind of confident ability to read and work with the data. So as a small business owner, sort of small to medium-sized business owner, you might be asking, how do you get started? So get familiar with Excel. And if we have time, hopefully now, we'll be able to do a quick demo. But you don't need Tableau, you don't need Power BI, you don't need anything super fancy. You can use pivot charts and slicers in Excel. That's free to understand in your business. The other thing about using Excel and pivot charts is once you get familiar with the concepts of creating a chart in Excel, then you can do it anywhere. So if, for example, your CRM, your marketing system, or Tableau or Google Data Studio or what any of these things, the principles are the same. So if you can do it in Excel, you can then translate that into the other systems as well. Google Analytics, if you have not signed up to Google Analytics for your website, it is a free tool and it helps you understand where the traffic is coming to in your website. So if you recall back at the start of this, I was talking about marketing campaigns and how to measure effectiveness. So if you're trying to, I don't know, if you've made changes on your website, or if you're improving your SEO, or you're doing something around email marketing or paid advertising, that will tell you where people are coming from to land on your website. So again, it's always about test and learn. Do something, check if it's making an impact. If it is making an impact, as I always say, do more of that. If it's not making an impact, tweak something and try and go again. Metrics and KPIs. So you can't understand what is working unless you measure it. And I know there's an argument raging about returning to work and hybrid working and everything like that. And there was lots of articles even on LinkedIn this morning. But when I start talking to KPI to companies and teams about KPIs at the moment, it's always, oh, well, you're only trying to give us KPI metrics because you want to find out what we're doing when we're all at home, working. And yes, that is partly true as a manager or an owner of a business. But for me, it's not actually about that. It's not about the number of calls that you make or the number of meetings that you make. It's what the outcome is. So if it takes you in your sales process, it takes you 15 calls to arrange 10 meetings, then that's what you need to do. So you need to do 15 calls every month if you know that you need to get 10 meetings every month. And that is a secret sauce that's specific to you or your team or your own small business, but you need to measure it to know what's working. And sometimes, there are always outliers, there's always seasonality, things can impact. But you will find that using data and trends, typically things will sort of always run in a certain fashion. Don't wait. Good data is the goal, but you need to start. When I start to talk about data quality to people, they think that means having a perfect database. It doesn't. It just means having enough data to get the information out that you need. So whether it's a report, whether it's marketing information, whether it's, you know, something to do with ratios around your process, you need enough to start getting the trends. But don't wait, you know, everything doesn't have to be perfect in order for you to start. So what you can do then is something like this. This is Excel, and this is a year-on-year trend chart. So you can start to see, obviously, you know, January, you can see 22 is the blue line, 23 is the orange line, and you can start to see the trends in terms of your fees or your sales or whatever, number of customers, number of sales. It doesn't have to necessarily be revenue, but you can start to see where your trends are coming from. So what I'm going to try and do is hop into my little demo. Pauline, you might just give me a time check. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, it's 25 to now. Thanks.
25 to.
Maybe
Perfect.
10 minutes or so before. I know some people may need to leave at 1:45.
That's fine. That's fine. Can you see my screen, my Excel there at the moment?
No, the
presentation's
in front of it, I think.
Okay, cool. Just give me 1 second then. I'll just swap this over. So we're just going to launch Excel. Okay, can you see my Excel there now?
Yep. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So really, really simply. So what you're looking at here is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got sales from January 23 to May 24. And you've got a big long list of numbers. So if you kind of run your eye down, okay, I'm sort of going from, you know, 27 to somewhere about 40,000 in sales every month. It takes a very long time interpreting that in terms of numbers to try and dig into that mix of it. So when we talk about deviation, what I always recommend to do is simply just do a pivot chart. So very simply, all we're doing is highlighting all of the information. So Control and A on your keyboard, and you're saying Insert Pivot Chart. And you're saying OK. And then all we're doing is we're dragging into the values. And I'm just going to put on a little currency there. And what we're doing is dragging the month into the rows. So all of a sudden, you can start seeing your visualization. And that is literally with 2 or 3 clicks on an Excel spreadsheet. That's free to everybody. So if you've got your dates formatted correctly, what you can start to do is have a look at your sales like this. And what you can do is you can just pop on a little timeline.
Okay. So you basically put in the month by month and it'll create the quarterlies or the...
Exactly. So if I said I just wanted to see what was happening, so let's say, because we're obviously only part way through Q2, I maybe want to leave that out. So if I put a trend line on this, and I'm saying, oh, that's interesting. It looks like I'm trending downwards. But if I take Q2 out of it, because we're obviously not, you know, only part way through Q2, you can see then that's not, the picture isn't just quite as bad. And again, you know, we can open it out then to having a look at each month as well. Again, we can pop some labels on there, so you can start to see very easily how you're trending. So all of a sudden, that sort of long line of figures is starting to make some kind of, you know, some kind of sense. Okay. So what I would do then is as an example. So same figures, but I would just change the type of the chart. And I can change it into a line chart. And I'm just going to put some little markers on it. So now what are we seeing? We're seeing there's something good happening in March and April, and there's something not so good happening in December. And again, very simply, for my pivot chart, I'll just move my years over into my legend. And you can see then, let's take off my filter again here. So you can start to see that March and April seems to be quite good for me in terms of sales. But I'm going right down here in December and January. So if I was planning in terms of my business, if I were to tell you, for example, this was it's because, March and April is busy because of Easter. But what are we going to do in December? Like, we know that December, January is always slow time for us. So we might diversify into making, I don't know, chocolate Santas. August might be a low time for sales for us because most people are eating ice cream and not chocolate bars. I'm just making this up as I go along. But again, from a business point of view, once you get that insight, so that's the data we had, which was the table. The information is now visualizing it, so putting it into context. The insight is knowing where our peaks and troughs are. And then our what are we going to do? What are we going to do about our making sure that we're ahead of the game for December. And then very quickly, just the last one then, very similar again. So if I decided that my monthly target was to be 36,000, same thing again, I would just highlight my table and I'd say insert my pivot chart. I'd pull my sales and my target line down to my values. I'd add my month. And then I would just change it again to a line chart. And now you've got your target line and you've got your sales. So you can see how far off you are in terms of your sales. And if you're presenting this to somebody else, a neat little trick that we have here is called up and down bars. So we can change those guys to green and we can change these to red. And again, that's really quite visual. We can see then where we're off our target. So you can do this for anything, as I say, it could be number of sales, it could be revenue, it could be number of visitors to your website, but you're all the time trying to find patterns essentially in each of the in your data, no matter what it is that you're looking for. And that is it.